thinking back on my time in China, like I kind of can't. It seems surreal in a way because like you hear so much about China the last 2 years because of COVID, and then it's like, oh shit, I was there.
And through those, we want to gain the attention of the Nordics to actually educate and inspire people that are new to Web3 and kind of hesitating to get involved.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of SourcePoint Asia, host of the Being China podcast, host of the YouTube channel, of course. Back with another one. This is another one of these episodes that I'm trying to catch up with some of our partners, some of our previous employees, interns, see what they've been up to, especially people I haven't spoken to in a minute. And Vincent is one of those. Luke, our intern, I would say you have the belt. You have the belt for the best intern that we've had at SFA. I mean, Vincent might be a little bit jealous about that, but like, yeah, I mean, we had some crazy experiences. If you guys have watched the YouTube video that we did before, I mean, Luke was with me in China. He was a marketing intern. Came with me all the way to the Philippines as well. We recorded a ton of content. It was a fantastic time. So just some background. I've had Vincent on the podcast before, but Vincent started off as a sales intern in Guangzhou while he was doing a study abroad program, correct?
Yeah.
And then eventually graduated to working for us as a salesperson for, I mean, it was like a year plus, like maybe 2 years almost, right?
Yeah, I think almost 2 years.
Yeah. So to make a long story short, besides me, I was doing sales before, and then Vincent came on, and then Vincent was a superstar. So it was like, all right, we definitely want to keep him on, and we want to work with this guy. And, I just kind of gave him the keys in terms of sales, and I hope that he learned quite a bit from it. And, we were always happy with him. So kind of built out our sales team in some aspects, and we've evolved since that time period. And yeah, a lot of the marketing initiatives that we do to this day were initiated by Luke. So I just wanted to catch up with him. It's been a while since we spoke. And yeah, so cue the intro, please. How you doing?
Not too bad. It's been a minute. Nice to talk to you again after. I mean, it feels like forever. I think I spoke to you like during COVID, but it does feel like a while ago.
There was a few business things that happened during COVID. Like I think the first one was the masks, like the PPE stuff, and then there was a different project that we worked on as well. I think you'd asked us for like a sourcing report. But outside of that, like we didn't really talk that much. So it was the other week, I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, I haven't spoken to Luke in a while, man. I wonder what's going on with Luke and how life's been since you were here. So let's start with just a quick summary of how you found SFA, your experiences in Asia with me and Mike. Yeah. And Imogen and the rest of the team and everything. What you've been up to these days?
Yeah, how I found SFA was I was just back in Ottawa in school and just looking for inspiration on YouTube, and I had been working for a influencer marketing company on how to source products from China, and I stumbled across SFA and some of your early videos, Rico, and just subscribed and kept on following it every week. And one of the weeks I remember Rico had a video on like be my intern in China, and I was like, well, what do I got to lose? So I put together a quick application, and the rest it's history, as they say. I got all the paperwork to get to China, which now seems like the hardest thing to do, and I
No,
somehow
it's
did
yeah,
it. And
yeah,
and uh, and yeah, I ended up in China with Rico. I first met Mike, and then I met you, and yeah, we met in Guangzhou, and
sushi.
yeah, the rest. Yeah, the rest was honestly, looking back on it, was an amazing time. I met the whole team. Yeah, I mean, I can dive into the experience as a whole, but overall, it was really, like, as I said to you before the interview started, it was my first time, you know, being in a more professional setting, because the job I had before was just with friends. So
Hmm.
being with you, Mike, and the whole team, like, it was my first sort of business working for, interning for. And yeah, I learned a lot, to be honest. I got the opportunity to wear so many hats at SourceFind Asia, that afterwards, I took those experiences, and it really allowed me to get where I am today. So
Nice.
yeah.
Because I think what's interesting is, I think everybody has a perception of how a job is supposed to be, right? Like, it's how
Yeah.
your relationship with your boss is going to be like. I guess we could start like, what have you been doing since the last time that we spoke, which I think it's been a while.
Yeah, I think that was like, was it even pre-COVID maybe? I think so. Like since we recorded a podcast. I remember I was
Since we
living in
recorded a
Malta.
podcast, it was definitely pre-COVID. But like, speaking, I mean, because obviously we had the PPE stuff going on.
Yeah,
You were still working with us at the time, and then
yeah,
I would say that's probably been
true.
like a year and a half since we last spoke.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Okay, so yeah, quite a lot has been going on. I I moved to London after China and stayed there for a while. And then when COVID broke out, I actually returned back to Finland, my home country, and started working in management consulting. Just thought it would be like a good way to develop my business mindset and get some more angles on that aspect, because I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't quite know like what direction to go. Me and a buddy of mine had started an e-com company earlier that had failed. So I was like kind of stung by the physical product space. So I thought I want to go a different direction, but didn't know what to do. So I went to work in management
Mhm.
consulting, applied for a master's degree here at the Stockholm School of Economics, where I started studying last August. Been living in Stockholm ever since. And that's where I also met my co-founder, one of them, and we started a company called Norn, which basically focuses on onboarding the Nordics onto Web3, because we all inherently believe in blockchain technology and the potential that it offers. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm actually hustling that full time. Considering, I haven't made the final decision yet, but very much considering dropping out of school, because it's not really, I don't think it's that interesting studying a business master's. I already did a business bachelor's, so it's kind of, yeah,
Mhm.
it's yeah, it feels very useless.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like what we always talked about when you're working for SFA. I was like, I learned more from just working on the business than what I learned in school, right? And then
Yeah,
of course, when you're freeing up your time, then you have more of the mental space to focus on the actual business itself. What I try to do with the company is I try to have a situation where it's like, we're not, I mean, let's be real. We're not friends. Like, I'm now we're friends, but in the work context, we're not friends. But we're friendly with each other. We respect each other.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I want you to feel comfortable in the work environment. I want you to experience things that you haven't experienced before. And then I also want to understand what you want to do, what you want to experience. So, I mean, I would hope that that was your overall take from working with us, is this aspect of like, yeah, I did some things I didn't expect to do. I experienced some things I didn't expect to experience, but overall, it's like, yeah, I got to do things that I wanted to do as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Overall, I got to do things that I would never have a chance to do at another company in terms of like running the podcast, for example,
Yeah.
and posting on the socials, for example, at the
Mhm.
company, helping with the email list. Like those are all things that someone with my experience in a company in Canada, like I would never get a chance to do that. So just having the opportunity to do those things was huge. And then on the more outside of work aspect, just being able to travel and go to China, go to the Philippines, and do this, like meet some of the people that I met. Like I would have never had that experience in Canada. So yeah, just that whole aspect of it is something that I still, I still follow some of those people today and still know them, right? So
Mhm.
it's something that I would have never gotten anywhere else.
So just for, let's say, for somebody who's completely new when it
Mm.
comes to blockchain and Web 3.0, what are you doing exactly? Like, if you just to break it down for somebody that
Yeah,
doesn't understand it.
yeah. So right now we're building community. We own the domains nft.se, FIDK, and NO, and through those we want to gain the attention of the Nordics to actually educate and inspire people that are new to Web3 and kind of hesitating to get involved, because the threshold to actually get involved and understand the space is really high as of now. Like it's super technical, and the user journeys are just incredibly bad. Like if you want to actually do something in Web3, you're going to have to transact with at least 5 different apps. So the user
Mhm.
journeys are super difficult, frightening, and there's also a lot of scams going on. So what we're trying to do is basically lower the threshold for people to get involved in the space by educating and inspiring people and building and kind of funneling those people into our community. Long-term vision is
Mhm.
to be kind of like an Antler of Web3 in the Nordics. And Antler is this company that incubates startups and invests in them and helps them grow. So we want to build this Nordic garden. That is what we call it, where we have all the Nordic Web3 startups sit in the same co-working space, and then we'll invest in them and help them grow as well. That's like kind of the long-term vision. But for now, we're just using the domains to get the attention of the Nordics and also be gateway into the Nordics for global players, say from Asia or the US.
How would you see this, like, sort of tying into, or do you see it tying into productized product businesses, physical product
Uh,
businesses?
I don't see it directly tying into it, but I think like in the future, it's definitely going to be tied in. I think maybe the most relatable or known example would be Gary V and his V Friends collection, his NFT collection,
Mhm.
where he's basically planning to build a physical products business around each character in his collection. That's his
Mhm.
like long-term vision. So I definitely see like the technology tying into physical products when it comes to like verification of ownership, and like even supply chain data could be really interesting to have on a blockchain, be completely transparent in that way, and yeah, just make it more efficient to track supply chain data. But I think we're still a bit, we're not there yet. Like it's gonna take a few more
It's gonna
years
take a
until we
while, yeah.
get those. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is not an investment show. Investment advice is not, I don't want anybody suing us. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because part of the reason why I something that's been interesting for me and I invested into it is
Yeah.
this cryptocurrency called VeChain.
Yeah.
So you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically it's going to be that. It is that, like, it's all the supplier information is tracked through blockchain, and it makes it more transparent for the end user, or whoever wants to understand what happened at certain stages. And the safety behind it is that, okay, right now, for example,
Mm.
if a parent buys a toy for a kid, the kid's playing with the stuffed teddy bear, and then they find there's some needle inside, and the
Mm.
kid gets hurt from the needle. we don't know at what stage of the production process or whatever that something went wrong. People can always blame other people. Other companies can blame other companies because they're like, well, when we sent you guys the teddy bear, it wasn't fully sewn, and all this stuff. It's like, so yeah, I really believe in something like VeChain because I see it with our industry over the years. We've become more and more transparent. That was that's one of our company policies, right? In SFA as well as transparency. And that's just the way it's going. Like people want to know more about how the sausage is made, right? So I just, and then of course, in terms of it as a long-term investment for me, I look at it like right now, it's not super expensive to get VeChain, especially right now with the, the drop in, in everything. Like we're talking about, like, I think it's like for one VeChain, I think it's like 1 cent or 1.5 cents or something like that. So yeah, like I was like, man, like, okay, when I saw that, I was like, I'll just buy like 100 VeChain or two, and then I keep buying it every single time there's a market dip, because I'm like, in 10, 15, 20 years, who knows how much this could explode to, right? And it just makes sense on a business level in terms of where you're seeing the trend of physical product businesses go in manufacturing. So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I'm actually curious to hear, like, from your perspective, still being on the ground, are you seeing more of these type of solutions in China, or like in general, like technology improving in manufacturing? And what's that look like?
It's tough to say because I haven't physically been in China for over 2 years now. But yes, I mean, we had to find different solutions to different problems. The technology is definitely getting better. Factories are more used to doing like Zoom calls and communicating more about what's going on. But I mean, I think COVID slowed down a lot because China has the zero COVID policy, right? So even if one person in a factory gets COVID, the factory's shutting down. So it's like one of those things that makes it tough for the advancement of everything, and even just moving goods from one place to another becomes so difficult because they're setting up roadblocks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely moving in that direction. I think it could be faster if COVID didn't exist. I think it could be much faster. But what's interesting is because of COVID, the factories have had to get used to communicating with their clients through these different channels that, like a Zoom, like even we have some factories in Slack now. You know what I mean?
Oh, really?
In some Slack channels, we have some suppliers communicating and things like that. And so the factories have had to adapt. It's forced them to adapt to a little bit more of a Western communication style and things like that. And I mean, that's only going to be a positive thing because, the more we kind of learn how to work together, the faster we progress. And also it's much more difficult now to get a WeChat account than it was before. So yeah, that's another aspect. You want to know something else? Like people still ask about you here in the Philippines.
Oh really?
Yeah, for sure. Like it's happened, I would say 3-4 times when I was hanging out with people from the refined mostly. And then they'll just be like, hey, what's Luke up to? And I'll be like, yeah, there's a guy. It's a good question. So what is Luke up to these days?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like after the internship, like I really, because I did so much, I had so much fun. Like, I knew I wanted to come back to Canada, to be closer to home and everything like that. I just didn't know, what to do and where to start because, as we just talked about, like I wore so many different hats that I was just like having a lot of trouble just honing in on one and focusing on one. I knew I wanted to like do something in the capacity that it is in Source Asia, but I was really having a hard time finding that. So I joined a buddy of mine. It was shortly after I came back, COVID became a thing and just started a sourcing company. Worked with you guys on that a little bit, and then after that, it was still the same kind of thing. Had a lot of troubles finding a job, so I joined a recruitment firm. Worked there in customer service. Did some of their social media as well, and then COVID affected their business as well. So decided to move from Ottawa and come to Toronto, and I've been living here ever since. Love it here. Huge city, lots of opportunity, and just sort of grinding away, building up my career here. And I had started like a few side little projects involving sourcing, um, and still trying those. They weren't as successful as I would have hoped, but still grinding away and still going at it. So yeah, I've now sort of built out my career at Hilti Canada and working on the logistics side for them, and hopefully can grow there and work on my logistics side in a more career oriented role through them.
That's fantastic, man. I get for me, it's cool to see like the influence of the internship. You still being in the industry, the things that you did afterwards.
Yeah,
Like it's super cool to see that because I mean, I don't know, like I knew what the benefits were of the internship, but then you never know if somebody's actually gonna execute on those things or if they might lose interest in whatever it is that's going on. And that's why for me the unique selling point with internship was it's not just about learning about sourcing, manufacturing, logistics. It's also you get to travel, you get to be in different countries, you learn about Asia and things like that. And maybe at the end of the day you don't end up in the manufacturing industry or logistics, but you still have this experience, right? Maybe it piques your
absolutely.
interest in, maybe it makes you curious about living in Asia. Who knows how it's going to affect that person, right?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, like whereabouts in Toronto are you living?
I'm actually right outside my apartment now. I
You don't have
live
to.
on
Don't say your
Dovercourt.
address. I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
yeah.
don't say address. Just say the area.
I live on Dovercourt, so it's like
Yeah.
Dovercourt in College.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just I used to live in Eglinton. I lived in a couple different places. I was in like St. Clair, Eglinton. I lived on King Street, and then I also lived on for the most time. What's that area called? It's so when you go like from Young Street, and then you go onto King Street, and then you cross over, and then there's another road that's adjacent to Young Street.
It's
You
not
remember?
Bathurst.
Not
Spadina.
Bathurst, Spadina. Yep. So I was in
Yeah.
Spadina as well, and there's a whole like condo section that's a little bit after King Street, which had like a park and then a couple different buildings there as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I was all over the place, but for the most part, I really appreciated living like in Eglinton. I think was probably some of my funnest times in Toronto. Um, so besides that, I know that I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about this, but like I know you had your girlfriend and things like that. So are you guys still? Is that still a thing? Still an item?
Yeah, we're in Toronto together. I moved in Toronto because she was in school here, and
Mhm.
so yeah, we're still together here in Toronto, and she's pursuing her PhD. So yeah,
Mhm.
we're living together here in Toronto. I moved here because of her, and there's just honestly more opportunities here.
So that's how many years, man? That's a long term relationship right there.
Yeah, we've been together for 10 years.
Ten, yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was like, it's surprising. But it's nice, man. Okay, so what do you see? Do you see yourself? Do you see you and your girlfriend as well, seeing themselves in Canada long term, or is it a situation where it's like, okay, we're open to the idea of, going to another country once everything's kind of more settled and she's finished a PhD and things like that, and
Yeah, Toronto was always going to be a stopover for me and probably her. Where I mean, she's not tied down to Toronto at all. I just came here for the opportunities and just being a fun place to work at. And then after that, I have no idea where it's going to take me. I'm just trying
Mhm.
to maximize my time here and maximize like how I grow my career really and just establish myself. And then after that, who knows where I'll go. I'm just keeping it open for now.
Do you have a particular part of the world that you want to go to?
Honestly, not particularly right now. I would love to go to Asia at some point again, just because it has so many advantages. But for now, I'm really keeping it open. I moved here during COVID, like to Toronto during COVID, so I'm just really enjoying this Toronto as a city right now. It's finally, it's been a few months now, but it's finally open. I can experience, a proper Toronto summer, going to the festivals and experiencing the nightlife and all that. So yeah, for now, I'm really just focused on being in Toronto and enjoying that and sort of living the Toronto life to the fullest.
Yeah, I miss Toronto summers. I definitely have to get back there as soon as possible because I always used to tell people, winters can be brutal in Canada in general, but like the fact of the matter is like everybody's experiencing the same thing, right? So like when the summer comes around, everybody wants to have a good time, and there's a bunch of different events in the course of 4 months. That the Toronto summers were amazing. You know, so I understand what you're saying. And Montreal summers, in my opinion, are probably the best as well. You know.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So one of the things that you brought up that you mentioned before was about like experiences with SFA and things like that. I think what would be interesting for the audience would be that now that we're a couple of years removed, how has that affected, like, besides going into logistics and some of the things that you did before, how has it affected how you approach work in general? The workplace, like the environment, how you view it, how has it affected it?
Um, I think SFA, like definitely when I worked there, still had like the startup vibe.
Yeah,
But the one thing, mostly
I'm still
honestly,
trying to
you
I'm
showed
still
me.
trying to keep the vibe.
Yeah, one thing that you taught me the most was just like processes and like really getting those set up as a starting point for anything you do. So I still like to this day, I still try to focus that and like how to streamline things. Like I still think in that way when it comes to working. Um and especially like
Specifically, what kind of processes? Just again, I'm asking because there's another version of you probably
yeah,
listening to this right now who's like, okay,
yeah.
so what is the actual process? Like what you don't have to give all the processes or anything like that, but just an example, right?
Yeah, like I remember working for you, like you like to have like some structure to your work and like it's like, okay, we're gonna do it like this and sort of have a clear cut idea of what you're doing and then how to do it. And then once you do that work a few times, like writing it down on a document on how to do that work, and
Mm-hmm.
then over the course of that work, sort of refining it as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for this logistics role that I'm just in right now, like it was a very new role. The company didn't really have a back order management process. And it's just like, I still revert back to those lessons that I learned in SFA. It's like, okay, like we're working at it. We don't really know what we're doing, but once we have a better idea, like, at work just now, I got asked like, okay, let's write down some of these processes. And I would go back on the things that I learned at SFA and just like, okay, yes, this is how we did it. I just opened the Word document. I wrote out what I was doing in my role, and you know, those influences from SFA and the things that I learned there are definitely, some of the things that I'm using in this role for those particular tasks are just like, how to how to better be just organized in my work, and then make it easier for myself going forward, in terms of just the organization.
So I guess one of the questions I was going to ask is like, since we're talking about the internship right now,
Mm.
you already talked about what you learned from it, but I'm more
Mm.
curious about how that's informed how you work now, like how you work, how you live, how these kind of things.
Yeah, let me think about that one for a while. I think like when it comes to practical skills, obviously sales was like the main thing that I practiced and learned. And I think like I remember the first sales calls,
Mm.
and in comparison to the later ones, like during the first sales call, even though I had like a sales background, I still hadn't I hadn't done sales in like an institutional way. I guess I would call it that, because we're still dealing B2B, even though most
Yeah.
of the customers are like small companies, but still I would call it like, yeah, it was definitely B2B sales. I hadn't done that before. And in the beginning, I was kind of trying to please the customers and like just
I remember.
answer
Yeah.
yes to everything they requested. And that's like the main learning, like to just shift the almost the power dynamic to be more of like I don't want to say reserved, but more like we'll see, like maybe, or actually no, and then
Yeah.
you like under promise and over deliver
Yeah, that's one of
instead.
the things we always talked about: under promise, over deliver. But in
Yeah,
terms of the power dynamic thing, I would say that it's like it's more understanding what your value is.
yeah,
Understanding what the company's value is. That's the way I look at it. Is like, I know how we can help you, and I know
yeah,
how difficult it's going to be if you do it by yourself.
yeah,
So then you can't bend the knee to every request.
exactly. And that's how I still I that still stays with me today. Like for example, now with our startup, we're gonna raise an investment round within the next coming months. And
Nice.
the the mindset I used to have would probably be like, okay, that actually caught myself thinking like this. It was like, okay, how are we gonna convince these people to invest in us? Whereas the actual mind, like the mindset and the thing I learned from SFA is like switching it to like, we're going to make you rich, like why should we accept you as investors?
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
it's like
Exactly.
just switching the whole thing around. And that's also about believing in yourself and your value. As you said, you know that you're valuable and that you're going to provide a lot for whatever you get paid. So it's all about confidence when it's yeah, that's what's at the core of it. But culturally, and like working in China and working for SFA, I think it just gave me a broader spectrum of like just a broader how do you say, like
Way of thinking.
perspective. Yeah, perspective. That's what
Perspective.
I'm. Yeah, way of thinking. Like just witnessing firsthand the way Chinese people typically work, and comparing that to like Americans and Canadians, and then I have Europeans because that's where I'm from. Like it just yeah, it both gives me confidence in myself, and also makes me realize that there's so many different ways of doing things, and all of them could work potentially. Just
Yeah.
depends on the setting and the problem you're tackling and the angle you're taking, and also like just learning the different cultures in order to be able to be a better leader and to be able to accommodate, because eventually we are going to want to be a remote first company as well, so we'll for sure have some employees in Asia and potentially in the US, maybe South America as well.
Mhm.
So it's just like, yeah, I'm so used to the Western way of working. And in the Nordics, we're very efficient as well. Not as efficient as the Germans, but still like on time, doing things efficiently, always meeting the deadlines. And it's just like expected of everyone. And it's like not, I wouldn't say work is that social. Uh, Whereas, yeah, I'm not saying Chinese are not efficient, but it's more hands-on management and leadership. It's
Yeah,
very hands-on, like
it's more of a
even
micromanaging situation than macro
yeah,
managing. Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Which is a big part of the reason why I never hired a Chinese salesperson,
Mm,
because I was like, I always wanted it to be a North American or European person who spoke English and was
mm,
sort of, um, I guess, similar culturally to me in
yeah,
some aspect, because I just knew I was like, it's gonna drive me fucking crazy if I'm always having to chase this person to do this or to understand why we're doing this. Like, I don't mind explaining, but like some things are
mm,
just kind of like inherently understood when you come from a similar cultural background. You just kind of
yeah,
understand, okay, he's asking me to do this because this and that, right? So I always found it difficult sometimes when I would work with uh, somebody where culture was
mm,
important in the conversation, right?
mm,
And a lot of times, I mean, Imogen is great. She's been fantastic since the beginning,
yeah,
since the second month that she worked for me. But like a lot of my education with Imogen was just teaching her how Western clients think, because a
mm,
lot of times it was like they were asking for things and she's like, why do they want this? Like, there's no point. Like, but no, I'm telling her like, no, Western clients want to understand what's going on and you have to give more information. And it's
mm,
also good customer service to not give them half the information or 10% of the information just because you don't understand why they want this info, you know?
yeah,
So it was,
yeah,
yeah, a lot of that was that. But I mean, now she's doing the same thing with other employees that are beneath her in the business. Um,
mm.
so yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that.
What's uh, what's your whole take on China? Like, are you still gonna go back there, or
I mean, first,
what's is
go
Rico's
ahead.
future look like?
I mean, first of all, I think it's extremely difficult to go back now, right? Because
Mm.
regardless of vaccine, whatever, you have to quarantine for like I think 3 weeks.
Oh,
Get
sweet Lord.
getting the visa itself takes a lot of work. It's not the way it was before. And then you have this again zero COVID policy, so you could end up in a situation where you're there, and then like for example, you fly into Shanghai at the beginning of that lockdown, you end up stuck in
Mm.
Shanghai for 2 months, like So it's a very very complicated situation, but like in terms of what I want, we started doing remote work systems in 2019 before COVID, right?
Mm.
And you remember why we did that, because I was traveling quite a bit.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is when I wasn't in China, a lot of the staff weren't going to the office.
Mm. Yeah.
They were still doing their work, and it was still fine. They just weren't going to the office. So I kind of just first I was angry. We used to have fines. We used to have late uh, late what do you call it? When somebody's late to office, we'd fine them essentially. And then at some stage, I was thinking to myself, I was like, if I'm going to be traveling all the time, well, not all the time, but frequently, it's kind of a
Mm.
little bit hypocritical because not all of my travel was business related. It was kind of like, I would say 60%, 70% business, and then 30% me just wanting to do the digital nomad thing, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so I was like, right, like I will, let's just have everybody work from wherever they want to work from, but
Mm.
let's just create some rules around it so that like maybe we change the time that we have the Monday meeting. We you know somebody can't just be jumping from country to country every 2 days. You know what I mean? It has to
Yeah.
be a little bit like, okay, we need to know where you are, what time zone you're in, and things like that. So yeah, so I think that for us long term, I definitely will have to go to China at some stage for sure.
Mm.
But I'm thinking more on the lines of like bringing the Chinese staff to other countries,
Yeah.
whether it's Philippines or Thailand or Vietnam or something like that, bringing them down for all hands meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. I think that
Makes
probably
more
makes
sense to
sense.
me.
I mean, I would be super stoked to go to China again. Like not for long term, but just to visit. but seems like that's not going to happen in a long time. Also super stoked on Hong Kong. I actually met up with Alan when I was in Thailand. Met up with Alan and his wife or fiance wife, I guess, in Phuket.
Wife.
Yeah, and had dinner there, and I just got reminded of how much I like Hong Kong, and I could definitely see myself living there again at some point. But I'm not sure how that's going to change as well now with the, well, it already happened a couple of years ago, but the handover back to China and well, it already happened a couple of years ago, but the handover back to China and but I still, like Alan was talking about it as well, like the Greater Bay Area project, how much infrastructure they're building there, and how much money is going to flow into like Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Greater Bay Area. Infrastructure projects going to probably create a lot of opportunity, especially in physical products, import, export.
That's cool, man. Like that's interesting. Yeah, because it's like I don't know. It's not very sexy. You know what I mean?
No.
It's not a very sexy thing when it comes to, because a lot of times I think when people think about entrepreneurship, they're thinking about like the big speeches you give in front of the company and like the management stuff, talking to people and getting investment and things like that. That's more sexy, but like the bigger thing of running a business is just systems and processes. Like that's how all of the companies that we are familiar with got developed, right? And it's like it's two people or one person or multiple people sitting down in a room, initially having a conversation, brainstorm session, and then putting it down on a document, and then implementing that process. Like that's really what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
And then that becomes everything that everybody else does within the business. But yeah, it's cool to see that you kind of took that. I mean, I can tell you where I took it from. Like so first client, as I think was Prodigy, right?
Yeah.
And I saw their, like, because we were working together, and they shared their Google Drive with us, and they had some SOPs in there that were for us essentially. So I took some of that, and I also took kind of their structure of how their Google Drive was, and then I was listening to a podcast by Tropical MBA, which interestingly enough, I met one of the guys 2 years, one of the founders from that. And they had a whole podcast about how they manage teams remotely. So, so then they were talking about the importance of SOPs. Like I knew it before, but then when I started hearing it from them, and then how they structured their business and how they're able to travel, and why they were creating all these SOPs, I just kind of went into overdrive with that. But then the interesting part is when you get to a certain stage with the business, you're not the one writing the SOPs; you're just reviewing them, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah. So what about, I mean, talk specifically about, like, I guess, reflection on China and Philippines, your experiences with that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like over the past 2 years, and then just thinking back on my time in China, like I kind of can't. It seems surreal in a way, because like you hear so much about China the last 2 years because of COVID, and then it's like, oh shit, I was there.
Yeah.
Like just the fact that I was able to get a bank card, like I was like, holy shit, how did I manage that?
Is your account still active?
I have no idea. I'm not checking that shit. But yeah, no, China was a crazy experience. I don't know if I'll ever be able to experience that again, but it was just such a crazy experience. I don't like, I go to cities in North America and I'm like, this is it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I look back very fondly on that time, and then the Philippines was the highlight to me, like just being in that city, and then being able to travel and experience the Philippines more than just Manila, but then also just being in Manila, experiencing the city, experience all it has to offer, and then just all the added bonuses of being at SFA and like getting to meet some of those people. Like I would have never been able to do that